We're going to get started here. This, just for everybody's interest, this will be the last meeting in here. We've been here for 6 years, believe it or not. Amazing how quickly time goes by. But this will be the last meeting. Next meeting will be at the Anmore Elementary School, which will hold our meetings for probably the next year. While the hub is getting built, they're going to be starting to, machinery is going to be here, I guess, mid-May and starting. And we've heard reports that they could have a roof on it by near the end of September. So really excited. These trailers are going to be started to be decommissioned, and over the weekend they will be moved down to the public works yard. We own those set of trailers. They will become, after we're finished with running the administration, they will then be repurposed as our public works offices, so, which right now have no floor in them. So, yeah, so we've had this plan set up for quite a while, and so just wanted to thank the school district for allowing us. This is going to be an incredible savings to be able to use that facility for a year, and I was a little bit looking forward to maybe having a meeting or two out in the park, which we've had on previous times, but that's kind of weather dependent. And I know the last time we had there, we had 3 deer walk through our council meeting, which was quite interesting. So typical Anmore. So anyway, let's get started. So before I get started, the Village of Anmore would like to open our meeting by recognizing the many Indigenous peoples of our area, including the following First Nations with communities that are located in the region that we now know as Metro Vancouver: Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam. Further, we would like to honor the important place in history occupied by the many territorial keepers of these lands and waters around us since time immemorial. So I'd like to call the meeting to order. Approval of the agenda. The recommendation would read
that the agenda be approved as circulated.
Someone to move that? Moved. Seconded. Any discussion? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. We have public input. So the public is permitted to provide comments to council on any item shown on this meeting agenda. A 2-minute time limit applies to speakers. I will note on this agenda that when we get into the draft budget, there will be an opportunity for the public to ask questions at that point in time. But currently, right now, is there anybody who would like to get up and say anything regarding anything on the agenda? Oh, please, if you could just come up to the podium and state your name and address, please. Oh, we're just going to turn it on.
Nice work. Hello, my name is this on? It's all good. My name is Eric Chan, and I live on 117 Blackberry Drive. My name is Eric, as I mentioned, and I am one of the Strata Council members of the Anmore Green Estates, and I want to thank you for considering our financing request tonight on your agenda. As you deliberate your request, I just want to let you all know that we are at an extremely critical time of the sewer connection project. We are very close to the final implementation of the project. However, we're currently facing an unprecedented time right now as it relates to the construction environment. It is unfortunate that this project has taken so long. However, we are delighted to know that there is a contractor that we have in mind that is willing to do the project starting July 1st. So we are very close to the implementation of this project. We're also facing a significant labor and material pressure and price escalation. Our construction costs are over 125% from the initial budget. The contractor is ready to go, and we continue to stay committed financially to implement and finish this project in its entirety. We've already paid $750,000, so that's $15,000 per homeowner up front already, and that's been quite a financial burden for the homeowners and the families of the neighborhood. We're requesting that the $230,000 loan facility that you can help facilitate will help the homeowners get this project across the finish line. It may be an insignificant material impact to your overall budget tonight and the analysis of that, but I do have to say it will be a substantial help to the homeowners as we finish this project. So we're close to finalizing this project, and we hope you can support our request.
Good. Thank you very much. Any other public input? Okay, see none, we'll move on to the minutes. The minutes of the regular council meeting held on April 5th, 2022. The recommendation would read,
That the minutes of the regular council meeting held on April 5th, 2022 be adopted as circulated.
someone to move that? Moved, seconded. Any discussion? See none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Is there any business arising from those minutes? No? We have a consent agenda. Any council member wishes to remove any item for further discussion may do so at this time. Could I get someone to move the consent agenda? Moved, seconded. Any discussion? Anything want to be pulled? No? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, we're on to 9A, legislative reports, Anmore Drinking Water Conservation Plan Bylaw Amendment. A report dated April 14th, 2022 from Ms. Halliwell, Chief Administrative Officer, is attached. Ms. Halliwell.
Thank you, Mayor McEwen. So as most people are aware, there are regulations that come into effect on an annual basis in relation to water restrictions, and that is mostly coordinated through Metro Vancouver in an effort to conserve drinking water wherever possible. So this amendment to our Drinking Water Conservation Plan bylaw is reflective of Metro Vancouver's new restrictions, which are 1 day a week of lawn sprinkling, whereas last year it was 2 days per week. So the new days are shown within the bylaw, and they are, I believe, Saturdays for even numbered and Sundays for odd numbers, and a restricted time frame as well. So they've reduced the number of hours that you can water as well. And those are the main restrictions. Those are watering restrictions under level 1, which automatically starts on May 1st and runs all the way through until October 15th. Once we get into the level 2, 3, and 4, if we do have further concern about drinking water availability, those areas have mostly stayed, they have all stayed the same in terms of the previous restrictions. So it's just for the reduction in the lawn sprinkling on the 1 day per week.
Good. So the recommendation?
The recommendation is that council give first, second, and third readings to Anmore Drinking Water Conservation Plan Amendment Bylaw number 672-2022.
Could I get someone to move that? Moved and seconded. Any further questions? Yeah, please. Councillor Weber.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Let me find the right page.
While he's waiting, I'll just simply say we need to make sure that we do a good job information session in regards to educating the residents. Probably a mailer would be appropriate. And as well, this, this is being stemming from Metro Vancouver, and what we're realizing at Metro Vancouver is the commodity of water is becoming a very expensive commodity to transport through all the piping, through all the quality control. So it is. A lot of money is being put into the distribution of and what is some of the best water in the world that we have here. So, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple questions. I know there's not much we can do about this because it's Metro Van dictated. But what is considered manual watering?
So that would be if you're using a watering can or if you've got a spring-released nozzle.
Okay, so you can go around and manually water.
Correct.
Okay.
So you can water edible plants, shrubs, trees, things like this. It's specific to the water sprinkling where people just put their sprinklers out or if they have irrigation systems.
Okay, and then the second comment, 2 hours is not a lot if you don't have an in-ground sprinkler system. It's easy if you have an in-ground sprinkler system. Has Metro considered that at all? I mean, if you're moving sprinklers all over your yard, that's, I think it's at 5 in the morning. So my lawn won't get watered this year. I don't generally water it anyway, but I'm sure we're going to hear from people that have that same concern. So that's just more of a comment. And then 6.3, 6.4, how do you go from $100 to $400 fines all the way to $3,000? Can you maybe just clarify the fines a bit?
Sure. So the fine structure is actually in line with what Metro Vancouver has put out as a guideline to the various municipalities. So municipalities obviously have the ability to set their own fine structure. Some of them were quite low. We updated ours a number of years ago to fall in line with
Right.
that higher limit. The $3,000 is, and I was just trying to flip to find the name of the act. The $3,000 is in a separate sort of piece of legislation where for really egregious
Okay.
contraventions of the bylaw, we can go under another piece of legislation to have a higher fine than we would through our bylaws.
Okay, fair
Yeah.
enough.
But that typically would not be used.
Right, okay, but it's there if we need it. Okay, that's all I have.
Good. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions or comments? See none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. We'll now move on to 9B, legislative updates, local government election bylaw, council code of conduct, and public notice bylaw. Report dated April 22nd, 2022 from Ms. Elrick, Manager of Corporate Services. Ms. Elrick.
Thank you. So this report is before council tonight in response to some legislation updates that have occurred recently. Firstly, Bill 26 was introduced in fall of 2021 by the provincial government, and two of the main changes in that legislation was firstly the bringing in the requirement for councils and boards to either establish or consider establishing a code of conduct. And secondly, the other piece that this report is covering of that legislation is the ability for local governments to now delegate their public notice scheme rather than follow the legislative traditional scheme of newspaper advertising. So those are the first two things out of Bill 26. Thirdly, staff has brought forward some amendments to the local government election procedure bylaw for Anmore, and that's mainly related to mail ballot voting. There has been a change in the legislation, mostly in response to COVID, that there used to be restrictions on what type of elector was able to participate in mail ballot voting. You had to be outside of the community, or ill or infirm, or other requirements. That has since been removed this year, so essentially governments that choose to allow mail ballot voting, which Anmore did in the 2018 election, now need to let any electors vote by mail. So that is the update to the local election bylaw is mainly to address that. So firstly, in terms of the code of conduct, the regulations are not in effect yet, but it is expected that they will be coming into effect in spring of 2022 to have councils and boards consider establishing a code of conduct within 6 months of a local government election. So what would happen post-election is councils and boards will either need to consider openly in a meeting whether they would like to establish a code of conduct or just review and reaffirm an existing code of conduct. So since 2017, the Union of BC Municipalities has undergone quite a bit of discussion and work on code of conducts for council. They have put out a model code of conduct. So the code of conduct that you see before you this evening is based on that model code of conduct from UBCM. Many communities have already established or are establishing at this time in anticipation of this legislation coming into effect. So if council does want to adopt a code of conduct at this time, it will come forward again post-election for the newly elected council to consider then. Secondly, in terms of the public notice, currently we're using the public notice default scheme, which is in addition to our public notice posting place, which is established in our procedure bylaw. So for Anmore, we actually have two. We only are required to have one, but we do have two. And that's the website and our notice board at the Village Hall. The newspaper is the default advertising piece. So some issues in the past few years with the newspaper advertising have been with the Tri-City News has gone down to bi-weekly and only once a week advertising. So it's quite difficult, especially in terms of land use public hearing notices that require you put the notice in between 3 and 10 days and it has to run twice, it's really hard to meet those timelines and the deadlines for the newspaper. In fact, we have in at least one instance that I can remember had to go outside of the community and advertise in the Maple Ridge Times for our second edition, which is not an effective way to reach the community. In addition to that, and partly maybe because of the reduced publication, the cost of the advertising has gone up quite substantially, and we're looking about $300 up to $1,000 for each ad in the newspaper. So it does hit the budget in a substantial way. And in Anmore, of course, the paper, the Tri-City News, is not delivered door to door here, so people would either be accessing it online or picking it up at the mailbox themselves. So what we are proposing here is that council consider introducing a scheme where, in addition to using our website and our notice board, which is our public notice posting places, we would also distribute notices via our email distribution list, which right now we'll have just under 600 people signed up for, and we will continue to encourage people to sign up for that, and through our Facebook, which we have about 700 followers on Facebook currently. If in special circumstances, we could always choose to additionally put an ad out or direct mail, or it doesn't prohibit the village from doing that, but it'll just help streamline the processes more, and I think ensure that we'll reach more residents. So that's the piece on the public notice. Thirdly, on the election bylaw, so as I said before, the mail ballot, change to the mail ballot would just be to update the current legislation that any electors can participate in mail ballot voting. And additionally, our bylaw currently is quite prescriptive as to the steps of the mail ballot and the timing of the mail ballot voting, which, in times like now, and who knows what the circumstances are going to be in the fall, I would recommend that instead of having all the prescriptive measures in the bylaw, that the bylaw just authorizes the chief election officer to set out the procedures. It gives a bit more flexibility. There are no changes allowed to be made to the election bylaw after July 4th. So if circumstances do change and they are too prescriptive, then we're sort of out of luck. So I think it would be better that way. Additionally, there's just some housekeeping spelling errors and removing some inconsistent and outdated legislation references. And thirdly, the other item that we're proposing be amended in the election bylaw is the order of the candidate names on the ballot. By default, the candidate names are listed alphabetically on ballots unless otherwise noted. In 2018, the bylaw, this was the first time that the new bylaw for Anmore was used, where the ballots were drawn by lot, which means basically all the candidates' names get put in a hat and they get drawn out, and then that's the order that they're in. The problem that happens there is that there's a timeline until which candidates can withdraw from the election, and we can't order our ballots or approve our layout of the ballots until after that lot, because otherwise we would have them listed alphabetically and we can just press go. That also delays us then doing our logic and accuracy testing with the election tabulators, which then delays the mail ballot process. So historically, with the number of candidates that have run in Anmore, I don't think that there's an advantage or disadvantage to having the names alphabetically or not. So I think removing that will just help us ensure that more people can get access to the mail ballots and that we can get them out quicker. So with that, I do have three recommendations.
Sure.
And then I'm happy to answer any questions. First recommendation would be that council approve Council Code of Conduct Policy Number 73. And that council give first, second, and third readings to Anmore Public Notice Bylaw 671/2022. And thirdly, that council give first, second, and third readings to Anmore Local Government Election Procedure Bylaw Amendment, Bylaw 670/2020.
Could I get someone to move that? Moved, seconded. I'll open up for discussion. Councillor Trowbridge.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with the removal. I think there's not enough candidates, but in the CEO portion, which is setting the time limits and procedures, are you just going to use existing time limits and procedures as your guide, or like, what's the plan?
So, through the chair, the time limits and procedures will be based, I think, on the current conditions. If everything sort of is back to normal, whatever that is right now, and there's a general consensus that there's a high comfort level of electors coming in person to vote, then we likely would have, a more prescriptive time frame for sending out ballots and having ballots returned. If it looks like we are going to have additional health measures or conditions in place where we may not have a comfort level, then we might open it up and put some additional staff in place in order to accommodate the receiving more mail ballots, because it is quite time consuming to process them. There's several envelopes. So I really think it's going to depend on the circumstances, and we'll probably determine that, by August at the latest.
Okay. Answers my question. Thank you.
Good. Councillor Weber.
Yeah. Just a quick question. How does Anmore's code of conduct differ from the standard? It didn't go through them side by side. Were there many changes, customizations?
So through the mayor, there wasn't really that many changes. There was a few things that were removed out of the model code of conduct that we have currently in other either policies or bylaws, such as we go over council meeting code of conduct and that type of thing in our procedure bylaw. And then our new communications policy speaks to some of the communications pieces that were included in the model. But other than that, it's generally pretty consistent with what the model is.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Any others? See no? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, thank you. Excellent work, and it's good to get ahead of this in regards to the code of conduct. Move on to 9C, the 2022 to 2026 Anmore 5-year financial plan. Report dated April 26 from Ms. Martin, Manager of Financial Services. And Ms. Martin, I believe, has a presentation, and we will be opening it up for questions after this.
It's probably just warming up. Slowly warming up. We're almost there. Almost read it. I'll be reading a lot of this out loud, so for those of you that can see it. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm just here to do a quick review of the 2022 to 2026 5-year financial plan that we'll be considering this evening. Just a quick overview. We have our municipal requirements, the budget process, the operating budget, our budget impact, a quick review of our hub timelines, and our capital and project budgets for general and water and solid waste. So for our municipal requirements, each year we have to adopt a 5-year financial plan before May 15th annually, and that includes public consultation, which is, we have different opportunities for that, and then adopt our tax bylaw after our 5-year financial plan bylaw before May 15th annually. The initial draft budget was presented to the Finance Committee on March 7th and referred to Council. We had some public input, we had public there with no input received. Then we brought forward a pre-approved capital budget at the regular Council meeting on February 15th, and we did receive one question from the public, which was received and discussed. And this is the first 3 readings of the financial plan bylaw today and the tax rate bylaw to follow, with anticipated adoption on May 10th to keep us within our regulations and bylaws. So a quick overview of our operating budget. It's even small on my screen, so we will have this available on the website after. We have a new line item in here, so for total revenue changes, we have a 6% change in revenues, totaling around $150,000. And then we have a total change in expenditures of 6.9%, which is around $172,000, with a net result of a tax rate increase of 2.65%. And as you know, you may or may not know, the consumer price index for this year is 3.8%. So this is below the consumer price index average. Some noted revenue changes on the operating budget. We have noted a very small increase in tax revenues, and this is for non-market change. That's for new building and construction, probably from some of the infill that has happened or is starting. We show a decrease in our investment income. I'm sure everybody has seen their savings go down. We held some high-rate bonds that matured in March of 2021, and then when we re-signed our new investments, they came in at a much lower rate. So we're seeing a decrease in those revenues on this budget. We are seeing an increase in permit fees. Again, we've seen an increase in construction or development improvements, so we're seeing a little bit more permit fees coming in. And then there are some minor inflationary increases for grants and fees. So the total there is 6%. And then on the expenditure side, there is a increase for salaries and benefits of $29,200 overall. Oh, sorry, there's two. There's cost of living and steps, which is around $29,000, and then staffing changes of around $80,000. But in an offset to that, we also have a reduction in contract wages of $85,000. Or sorry, this is backwards. Let's try this again. In our expenditures, we saw an increase in our contract wages and a decrease in our salaries and benefits, and that is due to one of our management positions is contract rather than salary. And then we have our community enhancement reserve was slightly increased by $20,000 this year. We have seen an increase overall in administration for printing and advertising costs. And then we have other reserve transfers. We increased our operating for tree trimming. We've seen quite a few hazardous trees come out this year. And then there was a slight increase for our additional PSAB requirements for audit. We also added an increase for the capital asset levy of $43,506, and that's an increase of CPI. So starting with our asset replacement levies, our capital asset levy that we put up annually by the rate of inflation, and that is noted on the 5-year just by the rate of inflation. The total annual amount transferred this year is $1.18 million, and that is to support either the replacement, repair, or renewal of our capital assets. The water infrastructure levy remains at $285,000 annually. So you can see here is a summary of the revenue changes and the net result of an increase overall $66,290, which totals 2.65%. This shows for the average household. The average household this year came out at $2.3 million. And we'll go over that a little bit later in the next slide. So this increase would be around $80 average for municipal tax. The Anmore Community Hub At the regular council meeting on March 15th, the budget for the hub was increased by $500,000 for a contingency, which may or may not be used, but with the variability we're seeing, that was passed at the last meeting. And then a couple of these are carried forward from last year. The hub project manager of $120,000 and the IPD contract engineer for 10. We also received our grant announcement against the Anmore Community Hub of $2.5 million. And then we are looking at a portion to go to long-term borrowing, and we're anticipated to do the borrowing in fall or spring of 2023, depending on which issue we get with our MFA, which is our municipal funding. The debt servicing is included in the 5-year plan, and we have estimates starting at a half year's worth at 2023. The remaining funds for the hub will come from our reserves and our developer contributions that we have received to date. The capital and project budget for the general fund, this is actually for our COVID grant funding, which we've just broken out which projects we're applying this grant funding to. So we are using a very small amount of our over $800,000 grant remaining for some COVID election supplies. We have, we're improving our mobile water meter reader, and we have a small financial software update, some GIS mapping updates, IT security improvements, and an emergency preparedness app that will be available maybe towards the end of the year or next year. And then for public works, a lot of these are carried forward from 2021. So these projects, the electronic signboards, the trailer, the speed bumps, pipe replacement, the drainage improvements are all pulled forward from last year. And then we have a replacement asset for our lawnmower tractor. We have one of our trucks that requires replacement, the works yard upgrade and trailer move, the road brining system, and then some very small trail and pathway improvements. The water operating fund, of course, the largest cost is our water purchased from Port Moody. So we saw an increase to the water rates this year to capture some of the increases overall. We have some capital infrastructure replacement that's happening over the next 1 to 3 years. Oops, sorry about that. Over the next 1 to 3 years in water. We do have an annual water meter replacement program where we have our first of 2 PRV station upgrades on this budget. The water meters to property lines is just, we have just a few homes that need some lines updated that are old and not sitting at the property lines. We have a remaining amount coming forward from 2021 for our chlorination station board. The water truck also needs replacement. And then we have an ongoing fire water pump failure, which was an emergency repair in Q1 of this year. Our estimates have since increased, and to mitigate that, we've removed a project and postponed it to next year. So we've increased here and decreased in other areas. The solid waste budget is, again, a contract cost. So there was an increase to our solid waste collection rate to $3.29 annually. And we've also added to the bylaw the opportunity to add a second bin for those owners that have a carriage home or an additional suite. They may purchase another bin for the same cost, for an additional cost. And this is just a quick review of our year-ending statutory and non-statutory reserve funds. This is what we have to tap into for our hub and for ongoing capital improvements. So our statutory reserves these are reserves that we have a bylaw in place, and there stipulates how we may spend this funding. So we have some for parks, capital, water storage, water utility, and operating. The operating reserve is more specifically a stabilization reserve, and that's to assist with if we have 3 months worth of operating that we need to get past, and it's more of an ongoing reserve, just to get us from end of year to when taxes start to come in. And then we have our non-statutory reserves. So these are reserves that are set aside but may be used for various projects. So our gas, community works gas tax, and our major road network funds, our community amenity contributions from development, and then what is remaining in our COVID Restart Grant, which is around $825,000. And then we also have a little bit of deferred revenue. This revenue is deferred, but it has been donated with specific, for a specific service. So we have a community center developer restricted donation that is around $600,000. And then we have an outdoor plaza grant as well. All right, so we can go into the report, or we can have questions.
Yeah, what would you prefer?
Probably the report, because it's a
Okay.
little bit more information
Okay,
there.
let's go into the report.
Okay. So the first of the report is the 5-year financial plan bylaw. And the purpose is to present the bylaw, to present the, thank you, now I can see you a little bit better. Present the bylaw to adopt the 5-year financial plan and the bylaw to levy the rates for the municipal and general and capital purposes. And we also must note our regional district purposes for 2022 from the budget that's been sent. So Section 165 of the Community Charter states that we must have a financial plan that is adopted annually before our annual property tax bylaw can be adopted. The financial plan must set out the objectives and policies of the municipality and show each of the funding sources and the proportion of total revenue that is proposed to come from those sources, and also the distribution of property value taxes among the classes, which is mostly residential in Anmore. I think it's 99% in Anmore. The financial plan will also show our proposed expenditures, funding, and transfers. So at the draft 5-year financial plan was presented to the Finance Committee on March 7th, and that was referred to Council for consideration. The Council approved the Financial Sustainability Policy number 60, which we have also attached, and this was to provide us with financial management principles for staff and council to consider when undertaking financial recommendations and decisions. A few more notes from the budget. So for 2022, our municipal tax revenues increased by 2.65%, and this includes new tax revenue for new buildings or construction, which is what I noted as non-market change. So these are assessments that didn't exist last year. So that's the tax revenue we're seeing from those changes. The change in our overall assessment value from BC assessment from 2021 to 2022 is 18.29%, which is made up of new construction of 0.41%, and the rest, 17.88%, is market change. So that's increase in sales. The consumer price index that we base our calculations on as a start is 3.8% this year. And I'm sure you've read overall, we're starting to see 6 and 7% inflationary rates. So we're keeping that in mind for budget. We've included in our 5-year plan an election budget for 2022 and 2026. The user fees for water and solid waste have gone up to match our overall operating changes. The Anmore Civic Building was increased from the Finance Committee meeting to 8.5. The Anmore Civic Building grant received was noted as 2.5. And the fire pump repair was changed to 50,000, with the SCADA design postponed to 2023. General 5-year assumptions. We looked at our inflationary rates and where we hope to see a leveling off of that inflation over the next 5 years. So we have kept our inflationary rates at 3% for 2023, and then slowly gone down to 2.5 in 2024, and then 2% 2025 and 2026, 2% being the average overall. The council chamber lease has been canceled for hopefully next month, and we've included operating costs estimated for the hub once we get that up and going. They basically cancel out each other. We've also added repayment of the long-term loan for the hub starting in 2023. Normally in the first year, you only see interest, and then you see interest and principal payments starting the following year. We've noted a second PRV capital replacement, which is scheduled over a 2-year term for 2023 and 2024. And then those projects will be completed. There's a fixed asset levy for our capital asset levy. We've just increased by inflation noted on the averages noted above. Now we can take some questions.
Before we get to some questions, I just had a few things I just wanted to add. I think it's important, first of all, this is, in my view, an incredibly good story to be telling right now with what's going on. I think it's important for people to realize that only 30% of the taxation that you get on your tax bill is really what we can control here. And we've had a financial plan in place for well over 10 years, and it certainly is starting to pay dividends. I can tell you this is the second year where we're under 3%, and we're probably the lowest, I would say, in the region. I don't know, I've heard numbers regarding in the Tri-Cities upwards of 4.5% to up to 6%. So for us to be able to do this 2 years in a row and still be able to fund our reserves is really we're in a very good situation. But if we do compare it against sort of our brothers or our sisters, the villages, Lions Bay, I was on the phone today, so Lions Bay is looking at a 6.5% tax increase plus a 10% capital, so that equals about pretty close to 17%. Bowen Island is straight 10%, and it's going to be increasing every year from then on just to be able to keep up. And Belcarra is at 5% with a 10% on water, garbage, and capital as well. So we're in a really good situation, and I think it's because we made some big decisions many, many years ago to put us into where we are. I noticed one of the things up there, and I see a few people in the audience for Hemlock Drive. You know, in the past, $300,000 wouldn't have been achievable with our reserves to be able to pave the whole road, and that's what's going to be getting done. So we're paving the whole road rather than just putting patches throughout it. It's in rough shape. So, you know, I think everybody should be rest assured that we are if you look through all our reserves, and then I think we forgot to even add, there's a $1.5 million of accumulated operating surplus that's going to be added to that as well. So I think it's important to stress, we didn't have to bring debt on for the new village hub. We did it because we heard from residents, and they said, you know, it would be fair for new residents to pay part of this, and so and we listened, and that's what we did. So, you know, we are a village that has no debt compared to, well, I'm not sure what Lions Bay has, but I know Bowen has a substantial debt. We just toured them last week, which I will get to, and again, Belcarra has a significant debt for their water system in the tune of about $4.5 million. So those are just my comments. I'd love to open it up to the audience first, and then I'll come to council. So if anybody has anything to say in regards or ask any questions, please, this is an opportunity to. If you could just, your name and address. I don't see anybody running. Yeah. Okay.
Matthew Campbell, 2420 Leggett Drive.
Hold on.
Sorry, there we go. Did you hear me before? Should I repeat myself or no? I do have a couple of comments. First off, I think it's brilliant of all of you in the past to set us up for reserves. I hate to think of where we might be if we had an emergency, something came up and we couldn't pay for it. I think putting away for a rainy day is a very smart thing to do, so I'd encourage you to continue to do that going forward, and thank you for what you've done in the past. I do have a couple questions with regard to Schedule B, and just some minor things, and they don't need to be answered now, maybe they'll get answered after, but looking at increases across the board as we go through from year to year, but a couple of notable things. Protective services, I've noticed, has gone down, so I'm just curious why that might be. When we look at from 2022 onwards, it's about give or take about $100,000 in reduction, so I'm just curious what effect that might actually have on residents.
My spreadsheet, and I will.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
And then the water utility, too, was a noticeable decrease there as well. So just curious on what the rationale or why that is. Thanks very much.
Estimated projects, but I'll just do.
No problem. Thank you.
Maybe while Ms. Martin is just looking up the protective services on the water utility, that is definitely reflective of projects that we have in those PRVs. We have some fairly large infrastructure
Yep.
spending in the first sort of 3 years of the plan, and then it sort of dips off because we're back into our regular operating on an annual basis.
And just so everybody's aware, because I have the number on the top of my head, because I had a meeting with Metro Vancouver we pay about $123,000 as our premium to Port Moody for water. And I'm in discussions with Metro Vancouver, seeing that gets waived or absorbed to the whole water district, because other municipalities get their water delivered at the wholesale rate. Why don't we? The argument previously was that was before Heritage Mountain was developed, so there was a cost to pump it up the hill. Well, Heritage Mountain now is very well developed, so I'm looking at that, and hopefully there'll be some good news there. I think the other thing that is really important, and I forgot to mention it with the budgeting, is that this council actually, right at the end of the previous council, so 4 years ago, we instituted at the advice of our engineer, Mr. Boyd, Urban Systems, and they did a complete inventory of all our assets, so a complete asset inventory. And what it was able to come to light was all our assets in the village, and that includes every vehicle, road, pipe, drainage ditch, everything, depreciates to the tune of about $850,000 a year. Is that about the number? Yeah. What that tells us is if we're not putting $850,000 away into our capital reserves, we're actually going backwards. And we are putting more than that to, we first caught up, then we wanted to know where we were at, and so now we're putting, and we're taking into consideration that as soon as we move in to the new village hub, we will start amortizing the replacement on it, so. Ms. Martin.
So the protective services, there you are. Protective services, we have a one-off project for 2022, which is our DCC bylaw rewrite, and that's a significant portion. And then what was the second part that you noted?
The second part I answered in relation to the water utility and those being capital project related in the first 3 years of the plan.
Yeah, could
Yes,
we
I
get an
apologize.
explanation
I
what a
use
PVR
municipal
is?
jargon.
PRV.
A PRV.
Let's hear from the engineer.
Oh, I get to speak. All right, I've been quiet all night.
It's a significant safety tool for our water, so.
Yeah, so due to our water being delivered all the way up to the top of the hill, up to the reservoir up in Port Moody, it then gets discharged from that reservoir, and you can think of it as a hose pipe quite simply. You've got a lot of water and it wants to come down, it has a lot of energy, and so when it enters into our village, as you decrease in elevation, it gets more and more energy. And so we use pressure reducing valves, PRVs, to decrease that energy, and so when it gets to your homes, it isn't too high and doesn't blow up all your plumbing internally. So it's kind of an important piece to have. And so so as they get older, the station, a lot of our stations don't actually meet code. They're getting old, they need to be replaced, and so we're at that stage now at the first real piece of our municipal infrastructure that needs to be replaced due to age. And so we're on the schedule to replace a number of these, and introduce a new one as well into the future.
Good. Thank you. Any other questions regarding the budget? Please.
Joan Walker, 110 Hemlock. As a tax-paying villager, I would like to publicly thank every one of you on council for the very prudent handling of our finances over the many years you've been on council, the transparency that you've given each of us. I think we owe you a debt of gratitude. And listening tonight to how we compare to many other municipalities, we are indeed very fortunate to have you. Thank you.
Thank you. I will open it up to council. Councillor Trowbridge.
Got it, thank you. Yeah, as much as I would not like to have PRVs because it would help my car washing if I had more pressure, I think it's a good thing to do. I have a couple of questions on the finances, on our investment vehicles that have come due, and that's why we've got a dip in revenue on that. I remember planning those, and we were sitting at a time where there were certain vehicles with abnormally high yield rates. So we grabbed those and we extended the term. So fiscal prudence would suggest that in this time of rising rates, we're expecting BOC to go up another 200 basis probably by calendar. Have we taken that money and put it in short term so we can rally it up when we have?
So what we did with those instruments is we changed from a fixed year term to a cashable GIC so that we, because we knew that in a few months the rates are going to change again, in a couple months they'll go again. So we're able to cash those out at any time. We kept them as liquid as possible.
Outstanding. Now, on the borrowing rate, and Mayor McCune is correct, we're borrowing as a public service, which I've never done before. But in this case, our constituency wants us to borrow, and it makes some sense to make sure everyone's sharing in that. But when we analyzed it, we had not had interest rates increases. So we were at a historic low, and the MFA is at a historic low, but it's going to have to trigger based on BOC as well. So is there an opportunity, or is there any logic to us cementing a rate before we really need the money in order to lock it?
That's a great thought, for sure. The MFA sets its rates, I believe, twice a year, and they have set for this year now. It is still very low, under 2%. And you have to remember, when we do long-term funding, they do a sinking fund. So we actually earn interest at the same time, and we get an actuarial reduction in our debt repayment, which is shown over time. So they actually look at it over a 10-year term instead of a short-term term. And there's a rate reset on those loans that you take out every 10 years.
And so our retained funds based on borrowing, I think it's 2.5 or something that we're borrowing.
I think it's even lower right now for long-term.
No, the amount is,
Sorry, 2.5 million for the borrowing, yes.
we speak in millions like it's,
Yes, there's just
the
zeros.
world has changed for me.
Yeah, there you go.
So those retained earnings, so to speak, we're getting credit for having those in terms of our credit worthiness, borrowing against it. So in other words, we're borrowing money we have to pay off.
So what happens is we borrow the money and it's sold as a bond.
Yep,
So the sale of those bonds, they earn revenues.
Yep.
And the portion of those revenues reduces our overall payment.
I got
It's
it.
a sinking fund, yeah.
okay. Reserve fund. I think you answered everything else. Thank you.
I just wanted to offer a bit of clarity. So MFA is the Municipal Finance Authority. And so what municipalities did about, I guess it's about 20 years ago, approximately, they started pooling their funds, so they became a bank, basically. And we can borrow money through the MFA. We have to apply for it. And the rates are extremely low. So I think right now MFA financing, which is a lot, what most of all the municipalities borrow from for all their infrastructure. I think the rate right now is, it's just a little bit under 2%.
Yeah, it's either 1.6 or 1.8. I have to double check.
So that is only that the municipalities can draw from, and that's where a lot of the infrastructure and capital projects are coming from. So that's when we talk about MFA, it's the Municipal Finance Authority. I sit on the board of that, so as each representative, and it's basically, it's just for municipalities to be able to fund some of their needs. So we've never dipped into this water, so this is kind of new territory for us, but it does make sense because we will literally be able to make money off of that borrowing. So, yeah. So, any other questions? Councillor Wevering, nice looking shirt.
Thank you. One thing I recall from Finance Committee meeting, and I apologize that I wasn't there, it was booked after I had was already committed, the new brining system. Can you give me a sort of a cost-benefit analysis of that? Anybody? I know it's going to save us money. How much money over the years? Is it going to kind of pay for itself over time?
I don't have the actual return on investment figures available, unfortunately, but certainly over time, in terms of the fact that it's brine that's applied to the road, it doesn't fall off the road like
Right.
salt does. It's also more environmentally friendly, so it's not just a cost. Not just a cost that it's benefiting; it's the environment as well. And obviously, you're using a lot less salt than you would to create the brine because it's a mixture of salt and water.
Right.
So I don't have the actual figures, but it is overall going to save the village money in the long term. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
when we
Yeah.
were deciding, it actually did some research online, which is pretty interesting because I didn't understand the whole concept. It actually saves a considerable amount of labor as well because you're not having to go out later at night. You can actually brine the roads
Right.
at the end of your shift at 4 o'clock in the presumption that snow is coming that night, and it goes right into literally the pores and the
Right.
grooves of the road. It doesn't go in, huge environmental. Most of the municipalities are going this way because of the environmental aspect, because if you think about it, if you've been behind the salter truck, most of the salt's just bouncing all over.
I've always been concerned about
Yeah.
that on heavy snow years, like it's just being thrown into the ditches,
Yeah.
which go into the creeks. And,
Yeah.
and so I'm sure the Environment Committee would be happy to
Yeah.
hear this. Okay. Any roads going to be paved in the next year? Do we have sort of more detailed line items?
Hemlock.
Well, okay. Anything else? We already kind of
So,
announced that.
so on the pavement management schedule right now, Hemlock is the next roadway, obviously, to be paved out. Hence why we didn't patch it when it did blow out. Finally, it was kind of more prudent to do Hemlock. Sunnyside Road will continue. Sunnyside Road, we will continue to rehab Sunnyside Road through the MRN funding budgets that we have. And
So what part of Sunnyside? It's not much left, actually, I guess.
That's the great thing about paving. Once you finish, you get to start all over again. So the main stretches really, which still need work, are coming up from Alder, and then up to this.
Elementary up, yeah.
Yeah, coming up Elementary, and so we'll go to Elementary to just outside Village Hall this coming year, and we'll be rehabbing part of the pavement down at the corner store there, because that keeps blowing out. Fun? Yeah, so Ludlow Lane, not that it really needs it from a pavement perspective because it doesn't have a pavement, but it's more from an operational
I
perspective.
remember just hearing something
Yeah.
about that.
And then we need to kind of reevaluate again at that point. Some probably on Fern will need some. But then at that point, it would be prudent to go ahead and do another complete evaluation of our roadways. It'll probably take us 10 years since the last time that we did it, so we can get more data to decide on, okay, what is the next kind of program for the next 10 years. And it might be we don't do anything for a while, and we just save it into reserves, and then
Right.
then we hit, a number of roadways again and kind of recontinue.
We have tackled almost most roads in this village, starting from, elementary was terrible, going to the school, and plus we designed the sidewalk for families to be able to go along there, because there was no sidewalk.
I remember, moving up here years ago, and East Road was bad, and then 5 years later, it was still bad.
Yeah.
Well, there's no money, and 10 years later, it was still bad. Well, there's no money. It's like, well, I've had to replace the suspension in my car. Like, when are we going to get on this? So I'm really glad to see the state of our roads. I mean,
Yeah.
this stuff costs
Paul,
money.
before we leave your point on roads, can I ask a quick question? If we're doing anything relative to paving that's significant, I assume that we're going to be checking with our GIS, making sure that the underground works aren't at their natural lifespan.
Yeah, I can talk to that. So the one, touching wood, hope
No,
this
that's
is wood,
fine. That's a good question.
that Anmore has in its favor is the majority of our underground infrastructure is actually our water mains. We obviously don't have sanitary sewers in Anmore, and then most of our storm network is culvert crossings. And so we evaluate our culvert crossings quite regularly, so they're in pretty good state. So our underground is in pretty good state, so it isn't driving our rehab strategies per se. However, one thing that we will be doing through the DCC bylaw will be reviewing our water system again and looking at the future upgrades and OCP requirements and all those kind of things. So that might have some kind of aspect on our pavement management, but for sure, we always want to combine the two things.
Because our pressure system is 20 to 50 years, right?
Yeah, so don't quote me, I can't remember off the top of my head how we set it in this municipality. I think it's either 50 or 75-year lifespan we put onto the pipe that we have in the ground at this point in time. I mean, typically, most municipalities, we use ductile iron here, which lasts for 75 years.
No, that's fine. So we got to put some money into the public works yard. Obviously, with the trailer move, what other projects have we got planned there? Is there any other budget for that? I mean, we've had some, you know. Okay, good, because we want to keep those guys happy. They do a good job.
Yeah, so the public works guys, obviously they've done a lot of moving around, and we've made them complete some spring cleaning prior to moving the trailer next door here over
Right.
to the works yard. But following that, once the staff vacate and go back to the village hall, they'll obviously take over these and do some renovations to the existing ones. They have a little new kind of shed for the brining system, and then there will be a little bit of an overhaul for a workshop. They don't really have a workshop, and the more vehicles and equipment that they get in, it would be nice to actually have a workshop kind of area where a mechanic can come and actually work on the vehicles.
Okay, that's a good point, because I was going to say, I wonder, you know, if we're replacing our assets too soon, because maybe we just don't have the facilities to take proper care of them and protect them. Okay, so that's really good to hear. Sure. Through the chair. Go ahead.
Well, when we were at the works yard and doing an evaluation of what was there when Lance was here, one of the things that became really apparent, your point is right on the money. They don't have a shed large enough for the backhoe or for any of the big equipment. So it does sit out,
Yeah, it's,
you know, $130,000 piece of equipment sitting there. So for the cost of one of those hoop tents and some lock block along the side, we
Yeah.
need to think about it.
Just for clarification, they did actually move some things around, so the backhoe, our expensive equipment is actually kind of under, we've decided the lesser equipment has gone outside and the more expensive equipment's gone inside.
But I think to what you were speaking about, we will be looking at furnishing a shop that, you know, in the weather, if something happens and repairs need to be made, they can be going inside, mechanics can come in and do work on them and that. So we don't have an enclosed shop that can handle that at this point,
Yeah,
so.
just through the chair as well, another thing, you know, as we know, you know, winters up here can be kind of harsh and wintry, and, you know, it's another place that once we keep those vehicles undercover, that, you know, we can put the block heaters on, they can actually be ready to use straight away, instead of the guys having to, you know, wait around for half an hour until things are ready to go, so.
And one last thing about the public works is the septic's getting revamped.
oh, okay. One other thing, have we considered underside truck wash? I know one of the issues with the snowplows and the F-550s is they're rotting out from underneath brake lines, everything. Like I wonder if there should be a feasibility study on that, cost-benefit analysis. It's pretty simple. You drive through a little pit, you spray underneath the trucks at the end of every salting if necessary.
Yeah, so the brining will significantly help with that application, so because we have salt not just flying everywhere, it's kind of in a more controlled aspect. But
Okay.
I know a number of municipalities have moved to that. I've actually installed a number over the years, and they're not that expensive. And the only the only downside is the actual effluent. So the water that's generated from the sprays
I was
actually
thinking
becomes
that, yeah.
highly, you know, high salinity
Yeah,
within
so
it,
you'd have
and
to
so
treat that and,
so it has to become treated, and
Yeah.
so that's the only kind of downside. You kind of have to do that cost-best analysis of
okay.
is it
good.
worth it?
And then, sorry, one minor question. I was unaware that there was an F-250 water truck. What is that?
I do I talk that one or no?
No, you may
No,
not have. just may
I
not-
believe, I'm sorry, I believe it's for the brining system, so they actually need to contain the brine within a water tank, and so I assume that's why it's been called the water truck. And
Oh, I
they could
see.
then, they will, during the summer, convert that into a truck which can be used to actually water the trees and whatnot on municipal
I
property.
believe the tank actually will fit in the new dump truck that we bought, so it'll do the whole village several times. It's
Okay.
just- And that was the purpose of the thing.
That's all I have. Thank
Good.
you very much.
Councillor Cryer.
One quick question. COVID-19 restart grant, is that a use it or lose it? And if so, do we have an expiry in it?
We have not been made aware of any
Okay.
expiry, but we also are certainly aware that there is a potential for
Yeah.
that, not that we've heard any rumblings. So we do plan on utilizing it, hopefully by the end of, at least the majority of it by the end of 2023. There will be a number of elements of the Anmore Community Hub that we'll be able to use part of that funding for that as well. So we're definitely looking for those opportunities.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Anything else? No? Okay. Do you have a recommendation?
So the first recommendation would be that council give first, second, and third readings to Anmore 2022-2023. Let's start that again. That council give first, second, and third readings to Anmore 2022 to 2026 5-year financial plan bylaw number 658-2022.
And
And that council give first, second, and third readings to 2022 Anmore tax rates bylaw number 659-2022.
can I get someone to move those? Moved, seconded. Any further discussion? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Martin. Great work. Okay, now we're on to new business. 11A, Anmore Green Estates request for financing options for sewer connection cost coverage. A letter dated April 20th, 22 from Anmore Green Estates attached. And Ms. Halliwell, you're going to follow up.
Yes, thank you, Mayor McEwen. We heard from Mr. Chan earlier today when he spoke for public input. We received a letter from the Anmore Green Estates Strata seeking some support from the Village of Anmore in terms of loaning money that is their shortfall right now in order to be able to complete construction on the physical sewer connection at Anmore Green Estates. And so they provided a letter outlining some of the rationale for why, and Mr. Chan spoke to that as well, and where the breakdown is in terms of construction cost escalation and some of the other overages in their overall budget. So that's all provided in detail in the letter for you. A couple of the areas I think that are important to highlight are that through this connection, it's a little bit unique in the sense that this strata is having to deal with another municipality for a sewer connection. So the city of Port Moody is actually overseeing the project in terms of connection. And as part of that process, the Anmore Green Estates strata and their residents there have had to essentially provide a bond to the city of Port Moody in the amount of about $200,000 in order to secure that the infrastructure is going to be done appropriately. So that is something that isn't necessarily typical for other stratas that may be looking to implement a regional sewer connection. And so that's one piece. And the other piece is that essentially without this kind of funding program, the only option for them is a levy. So they would be doing a special levy for their residents, which they've equated to $4,600 per resident. That would be in addition to the other costs that have come up for them in the past couple of years through special levy. So what they're asking is that we provide them with a loan and that they would repay that within 5 years. Now, the village does have the authority to undertake this as a process. It's within the Local Government Act, and we've got legal opinion to say that we're well within our authority to do so, and that we have a couple of options that if council did decide that they wanted to move forward and provide this that we could either go through MFA, as we talked about earlier, and do a short-term borrowing loan, and that is not a time-consuming process. And then we would look to implement another local area service bylaw for the homes that are benefiting to recover those costs over a 5-year term, including interest. The other option is for council to authorize the lending of our own reserves internally. And at that time, as staff, we would likely recommend that we would be looking to recover any lost interest that we would have gained by having those reserves in our investment instruments or in the bank. There's also an opportunity, if council would like to discuss or for us to provide additional feedback, on an administrative fee that would be included for the additional time it would take staff to administer the local area service bylaw and add in the costs to their property tax notices for the benefiting parcels. So that's sort of the update from that perspective. I'm happy to answer any questions that council has, and we can talk about a resolution if council would like to move forward with anything.
Yeah, I just want to add a couple things. This has been a very difficult and challenging situation. We have different levels of government. We have Anmore, we have Port Moody, we have the Ministry of Environment, we have the school district. This has been very, very tough on the residents of Anmore Green. And, you know, we are very, very close, as was commented earlier, that we are close to that this will get done. And I think if it hadn't have been for a mediator or a moderator or mediator getting involved, it was very, very complicated. You know, I certainly think that, and again, I think that's something to refresh everybody's memory. This was enforced by the ministry. There was no option about refurbishing their septic field or redoing it. This was, no, you're hooking up, that's the end of it. So we've kind of had a fairly firm hand in regards to how we dealt with this. Again, one of the things that noted for me was the bond of $200,000, which is significant. We all know that cost overages are going right now. When we met with Brandy and Eric, you know, they said that they were very surprised that even the civil works came in at what they had sort of budgeted, fairly close anyway in today's time. So I just wanted to add that, and I look forward to the conversation. So I've got Councillor Trowbridge.
Yeah, I'm empathetic to the cost overrun as well. 125 to 130% is, if you have anything to do with the construction industry, and there's some faces here that do, that's the kind of numbers. So the opportunity to plug us is that we've held it in control for the hub. But that's not on this topic. Sorry, that was unabashed and unacceptable. You know, the fact that there's a $200,000 bond requested and being legally demanded by Port Moody, you know, makes me feel really empathetic towards the group. That's a ton of money. That's almost what their ask is. The ask is 230. If we do this loan, I'm in favor of doing it through the MFA. If there is a recovery cost for staff admin, if we can keep it realistic and as low as possible, I feel for these folks. I feel for the residents. This system has had its issues for 2 decades. It's something that you should all know. Anmore has no authority over septic systems at all, none. It's Fraser Health. It's everyone but us, MOE, and so this was, as Mayor McCune said, pretty well thrust on us as an administration in a situation where we knew nothing really about the details, nor were we equipped to do anything with it. But the real sad thing is that I think, you know, it was approved, doing the research, it was approved twice by Fraser Health when it had already failed. That's not very good. And so that made victims out of out of the residents without their knowing. So, I'm in support of helping them out. What makes it different to me, I want to be clear about this, because I don't want to be precedent setting if we do vote for this. I have a septic field. I don't expect this village, when mine needs repair, to lend me the money to do it. If we think in those terms, I don't think we're thinking correctly, because I'm also not dealing with other jurisdictions in another city, and I'm also not providing bonds to another city. I'm also not being mandated by the provincial government to take the action. It's a very different situation for even Canterwood and the other stratas here. There's no mandates for them. So that's, normally I would not be in favor of lending public money to a project like this, but it has idiosyncrasies that are not likely to ever occur again. I do have to do a little bit of housekeeping though in the letter, and Mr. Chan, you weren't around going through the 3 years of agony that this inflicted upon everyone. But in the letter, it talks about resolving the failing septic field and pollution in neighboring school grounds. That's a fearful statement, particularly when it was never proven that there was any pollution of any kind on any school ground. There was an engineering report that identified fecal matter in Port Moody, not in Anmore, adjacent to the high school, and in the report, the engineer identified that they weren't sure if it was animal or not. So there's no conclusive confirmation that the field has leached into the school. That's an important feature for parents and people to know. The other thing is, and I'm going to be a little cheeky here, it says negotiating the legal agreements between the parties, all the parties, has delayed the implementation. Anmore met all its obligations on time. It is not one of those parties. The legal delays were between SD 43 and AGE. Just a minor point, but it's important for our constituents here to know that Anmore did not hold this up. But I'm in favor of sorting this out.
Councillor Wimmer.
This is one of those things that really tests you as a councillor. When I look at all this analytically, the answer is no. I don't think we should be providing loans to private entities. But for everything that Councillor Trowbridge just mentioned, this is not a simple situation. This has not been a simple thing to deal with. I would say this has been the toughest thing that we've had to deal with on the last two councils. I think the resident said it the best. We want to get this across the finish line. And for that reason, I've got to think about the people there, what they've been going through on this. This has been hell. And if I can assist, if this council can assist to get this done, if this is the last thing that we need to get it done, as long as it does not cost the taxpayers in Anmore a dime, I'm adamant about that. And as long as it's legal and ethical, proper use of our resources, then I'm in favor of it.
Thank you. Any other Councillor Litter?
First off, I concur with Councillor Trowbridge on what he said about the project initially and the other municipalities, the other municipality involved. I do have a question though. The 200,000 bond is cash, right? They have to put up?
I believe that would have been up to the strata. I believe it was a cash bond, yes.
Okay, when do they get that back?
After successful completion of the project and that it's been signed off by the city of Port Moody in terms of being complete to their satisfaction.
Will that be used to pay the loan off if we approved it?
That's not information I have, but maybe I can ask Mr. Chan to speak on that.
The question was who gets the loan?
Once the work is complete and the cash is returned that you put forward as a bond, the 200,000. Say that again?
It's going to be used, some of it's going to be used to pay the contractor.
So the bond itself has been taken into consideration, is what I'm understanding, in terms of the overall project budget, and it'll be used to pay the contractor.
Okay.
Any other questions? Do you have a resolution, Ms. Halliwell, or Ms. Martin?
Ms. Martin has
Oh.
a comment.
I just have one note
Okay.
for consideration when you're looking at the way you'd like to potentially do the loan. I would recommend taking it from reserves and using the MFA short-term borrowing structure
Okay.
for the terms. Only because it does affect our long-term borrowing.
Yeah. Also, it also can expedite things quite quickly depending on the execution of the contract and that, because I know they're waiting after tonight's meeting. I believe, Mr. Chan, they've got a community a strata meeting, and that way they have to get buy-in. So that's why it's really pressing on tonight's whatever we're going to do to be able to.
So it reduces our facility.
Yeah.
So, based on our prior year and our LDG yields, we have a limited amount of borrowing, and we also have a limited amount of asset-free borrowing. So, the asset-free borrowing is what we'd be up for our 2.5 million.
Yeah.
And it can affect it because it puts a liability on.
I get your logic. I agree with that.
And it's believe it or not, it's 5 years, which, as we know, goes by very quickly. So do you have a recommendation?
Sure, I'll give it a shot here. That council authorized the lending of $230,000 to Anmore Green Estates Strata by providing internal reserve funds within the structure of the Municipal Finance Authority borrowing for a 5-year term, and that council direct all costs to be recovered through a local area service bylaw, including an administration fee based on cost recovery, and that council request Anmore Green Estates to initiate a local area service bylaw.
Good. Someone to move that? Moved, seconded. Any further discussion? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. And so the process would be is that now a bylaw will have to come forward to the next council meeting. Is that correct, Ms. Halliwell?
Yes, so with the initiation happening, and the reason that we included that within the resolution is it's a more expedited way to have the process followed if we have the residents at Anmore Green Estates petition council for the local area service bylaw,
Okay.
as opposed to council initiating it.
They have deadlines that they have to.
Correct, and we've had discussions with the representatives at Anmore Green Estate Strata, so they will be working to get those signatures on the petition and submitted to council as soon as possible.
Good, good. Okay. Ms. Martin? Yeah.
So we'd start to see those next year.
Okay, perfect, good. Okay, so we'll move on to the mayor's report. Just got a few things. April 10th, most of us here attended the Spirit Park cleanup. It was great. There was about 30 people here. It was great. Turned the gardens and got rid of all the winter blight that was on the gardens and really revamped them. And it was great because the following Saturday was Easter, and we brought back Easter, the Easter Bunny, and there was 300 plus people here, and it was an amazing event. Councillor Laidler was here with his grandkids, and it was really something. It was nice. The weather was participated. The volunteers, Sabina Perrin, who ran the event, did an amazing job, and it was really amazing. Biggest turnout I'd seen. So. On the 21st, your fire trustees from Anmore, Councillor Weberink, Councillor Trowbridge, and myself went to Bowen Island and toured. They're building a new fire hall over there. And I don't know if a lot of people are aware, but we need a new fire hall here. The fire hall that we have here is not seismically sound. It's made out of cinder block. And also, it is not WCB compliant. And I think it's important to remember that these are volunteers that are basically protecting us, and when they come back from a fire or any sort of, we don't have facilities now to be able to put their turnout gear into a special area, and then they can shower off, so they're not bringing some of this contamination home to their families. And we need to get on this sooner than later. So that was the purpose. We went with members of Belcare as well, because they're part of the Saskatchewan Volunteer Fire Department, plus Chief Sharp and Assistant Chief Bolin. And it was amazing. They're building a facility over there right now. It was about $3 million. They have a fixed cost and 3.8, and it would fit right where we have here. We provide a ton of opportunities and that, so we weren't looking at it very closely, but it's something that we are definitely is on our horizon now that we've hopefully have shovels and we're ready to go with the hub. This is the next project that needs to be done. It needs to be done as soon as possible. And with that, I did talk to Chief Sharp this afternoon, and I'm going to suggest, if Ms. Halliwell, if you could organize a dinner workshop and invite all of Belcarra Council and all of Anmore Council, and we could host it at the fire thing here to discuss what we found out on the tour with both councils in a very, very, informative, no decisions made, but just in regards to fire protection and that throughout both municipalities. Also, this Friday, I've got a meeting with BC Hydro about the reservation system that we're going to be very insistent gets implemented for Bunsen Lake this summer. With the administrative offices going down at the public works yard, that is in essence our command center. We cannot have any cars blocking that throughway to there in case something happens. So we will be very direct in regards to our resolve and what was going to happen. They did mention at the end of last year that they were looking into it. We haven't heard anything since, so we'll be following up with that. And then May 7th, I won't get into it too much because I know probably a couple of my councillors will talk about. We're been invited again to participate in the May 7th May Day Parade in Port Coquitlam, which is great. And I just wanted to ask Mr. Boyd, the remaining covered bus stop, when can we expect it?
As I walked into there, I was like, I've got to follow up on that.
Okay.
I don't have a great answer for you, but
Okay.
I'll definitely follow up this week
Okay.
and get a defined date for you.
Second question is any sort of timeline for the residents of Hemlock? Because we have a few here in regards to the Hemlock repaving.
Yep. So we've posted the tender documents up onto what we call BC Bid. We can't actually engage contractor until the finance have been approved and whatnot. So we will be looking to award, I think it's just after May 15th.
Okay.
The tender, and then that'll be the first thing that I get the contractor to
So
get.
hopefully by the end of May?
It won't be complete by the end of May, but it will definitely be moving forward by the end of May.
Good, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I just wanted to mention one last comment. I guess I've been on council since 2007, and one of the first finance committee meetings we had in the old hall was a guy a resident came out who I'd never met before at the time, Mark Roberts, and he was the chief finance guy for Port Moody. And he really opened my eyes to municipal finance, and he said, we're on a trajectory here where we're not going to be sustainable. And he was the one that really lobbied, and I learned so much from him in regards to financing and how to the foresight that he had about sustainability. I'm sad to say that he is moving out of the village. He sold his house. He went from a chief finance officer at Port Moody, became the CAO of Pitt Meadows, and he has been on our finance committee for all those years. And I'll tell you, he has been instrumental. We actually gave him an award, the Community Spirit Award, a year ago for his work. But when I heard the clapping earlier on in regards to our financial situation, I have to tell you, I've learned a lot, and a lot of it is attributed to him. And I would like to be clapping and thanking him for helping us in regarding what we did, and he's instrumental in where we are. So we will miss him. He's bought a house over on the island, and I wish him the best. They had a family that I knew all their kids and coached in basketball and that. So just wanted to make those comments. So I'll move on to Councillor's report.
Stole our thunder.
Okay, Councillor Chalbert.
I'm going to go through everything Mayor McEwen just said, but in much more lengthy, boring detail. No, we were all doing all those things, but I do want to say that this was my first year volunteering to do gardening. I've never gardened in my life. The only closest to a garden for me is a racetrack painted green. But if I knew that you could do it with a tractor, I'm now a gardener. the May Day Parade, I just want to touch on that. What you may not know is this happens every year in Poco. It's in their downtown. It is so well attended that streets are just lined with families and kids. All the mayors attend. They're all running around, throwing candies at the kids and having fun. And Anmore has the distinction of representing about 25% of the car count. So if you get a chance to go, it's on Saturday the 7th. You can come and go as you please. There's lots of parking on the periphery, so you don't have to stay. And I know a lot of people think about parades and go, kind of dull. We drink, of course, in the car while we're driving, so that makes it a lot more fun. But it is worthwhile. It's really worth going out if we could have some Anmore folks there, if you have time. Thanks. Why are you hitting me?
Go ahead.
Because what is wrong with you? I am not going to repeat everything that Mayor McEwen said, because you don't need to hear me talk any more than you need to hear the rest of us. But I was at Easter egg hunt, and I was at Spirit Park, and it was lovely to see everyone. It was such fun, and the park looked great. Easter was amazing. We had over 300 people. It was great. Very sad to hear Mark Roberts leaving. He's been amazing. I've learned a lot from him, and he will be sorely missed. I had two good meetings. One was with the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, Minister Bennett. I was invited through Member of Parliament Ron McKinnon. Sat down, and it was just a very small roundtable conversation. There was only about a half a dozen of us. And we just spoke about the struggles that our communities are having with addiction and mental health issues, and we're working hard to get the car 67. We've had a lot of conversation about that, I think, with RCMP visiting us, and I think most of us are familiar with the need to have more mental health supports in the Tri-Cities, so that was a very good meeting. Also had another mental health task force meeting with the school district. Went very well. We're working now, and we will need to do this for the village of Anmore. We're sharing what each municipality is doing to support mental health for our residents. So that is something that we'll have to talk about in the next couple of months. And then we're working towards determining our goals for the task force and what they may look like. But I believe the election will slow any decision making down there. So we might have to pick that up again. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Laidler.
I'd like to thank the people here in attendance at the meeting for the support they've shown to the council tonight. It's greatly appreciated. I also want to point out that Mayor McEwen has been representing the village of Anmore a great deal on all of the committees, both provincially and in the Greater Vancouver area. And without his knowledge and input, I think we would be sorely lost in the big scheme of things. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you were good, right?
I'm good.
Okay, we have some information items, some general correspondence dated April 7th from the City of Fort John regarding extended hour childcare, communications from the District of Sicamous, and another one from regarding invasive mussel. Now we'll open up to public question period. Public is permitted to ask questions of council regarding any item pertaining to village business. A 2-minute time limit applies to speakers. Nobody? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
Jurgen Dirkten, 1815A East Road. My question to the Mayor and Council is really regarding the optics of infill in Anmore. I'm wondering if you're willing to compare yourself once again to other municipalities and how they're doing things. Just to let me point out that in Port Coquitlam, Mayor Brad West went to bat for a pensioner who was out 25 cents, just a whole quarter, because of that city's A&W surcharge on to-go bags, which violated bylaws. It's a letter to the editor in the Tri-City News, and it's well worth reading. It's about a mayor willing to step in for the benefit of his constituents. In Anmore, the community amenity contribution, or CAC, is $150,000. Apparently expected all up front. Is that a reasonable amount of money to extract? That's equivalent to about 5 $30,000 cars, and who can afford that? Many, if not most, of the infill people are actually old-timers, in other words, retired. They're on fixed incomes. So they're in Anmore, seniors are not only paying for the new hub through their own taxes, but they're also paying it through the $150,000 CAC. So is that not actually a form of double dipping of certain taxpayers? Is it actually fair play? Do you want long-term residents to sell their properties to developers, or do you want them to oversee the development of properties that they subdivide? In other words, the latter approach allows them to age in place, does it not? Do you want gentle densification, which is organic, or do you want developer densification, which is not organic? Do you want to grow the population naturally, or do you want to grow it unnaturally? To use another comparison, the CAC for the city of Abbotsford is a voluntary, emphasis, voluntary contribution of public art. In Coquitlam, it's about $5,000, which is 30 times that of Anmore's. So my question is, how about revisiting the infill CAC? It's actually a recommendation of the GP Rollo report. They say definitely within 5 years, ideally within 2 or 3 years, and it's been almost 5 years. My reading of the Rollo report also is that it assumes that there are, quote, affluent buyers, and they're correct probably in that. But it also seems to assume that current landholders are necessarily affluent, which in my view seems incorrect. So I suggest maybe what you can do is lower the charge, and you will get more money and more agreeable growth, and is keeping with our infrastructure. As it stands now, I think the village should be prepared to put up plaques in the new hub in the name of each citizen who's actually forked out $150,000. Thank you.
So your question is about revisiting the infill. I had a few questions. First of all, I've always recused myself in regards to the CAC contribution, but I will state a few facts. The first fact is that when J.P. Rollo, which you mentioned, he came and did the report. It was a public meeting. He answered several questions, and we actually brought him back for a second time to answer questions further for a full analysis, and nobody was able to deter him regarding what he did. You're right, he said that it should be reviewed in 5 years because the prices have gone up significantly in 5 years. I think this council has been reluctant to do that at this point. You talked about keeping sort of an organic growth. We've had 5 or 4, or is it 5? 5 applications so far, and people, and it's worked well. So that has been a slow thing. It's not perfect for everyone, and it was never meant to be perfect for everyone. It was supposed to be just a limited organic growth that was not going to change much in the whole community. So you kind of contradict yourself on several of your assertions there. I would suggest that if somebody wanted to or thought that the fee was unfair, because again, you can't compare our rate with an Abbotsford or a Port Moody or those sorts of things, is that it may be worthwhile for J.P. Rollo to do another analysis. I worry, though, what it could turn into. Which is what? It could be more, considerably more. If you look at the fact in 5 years, the value of land has gone up considerably here, but again, I would always recuse myself on that, but those were just some of the realities. So is there any other questions on public input? No? Okay, then, sorry, I missed our Chief Administrative Officer's report. Sorry.
It's okay. It's only
Okay.
because I do have something to
Yeah.
share tonight that I asked to be able to speak. And you did mention it at the outset. Thank you, Mayor McEwen, about our trailers moving. So I just wanted to make a note for our community that as of tomorrow, our offices will not be open to the public on a regular basis. So the process is that we have to move all of our furniture out, then we have to have the company come in and dismantle the trailers, then move them down to the works yard, and then put them all back together, and then we have to move our stuff back in. So as you can imagine, that's going to be a little bit time consuming. And we're hoping that we're going to be able to reopen our doors to the Village Hall in a normal basis by about the end of the first week in May, second week in May. So keep an eye out on our website and Facebook because we'll be doing lots of updates through that to keep everybody apprised of what's happening. We do have utility bills that are going to be due on May 13th, so I would highly encourage everybody to pay those online if possible. We will be making provision for people to come in and pay by cash or debit on Tuesday and Thursday mornings between 8:30 and 11:30 in this building here. These trailers will remain until we physically move down to the works yard, but you do need to make an appointment for that, and you can do that via email at village.hall@anmore.com. Otherwise, like I said, best to pay those online. And the only other thing I wanted to mention is we do have a special meeting booked for May the 10th to look at adopting our financial plan and tax rate bylaws. That's going to be happening at the school, which is where all of our future council meetings will be held as well. I just wanted to mention that one because it's a special meeting, not part of our regular schedule. And I think that's it.
With one of the things with the
Thank you.
school, can we make sure that we have the adult chairs there rather to transport it down?
We will make sure, yeah. Or we'll just have to lower the tables.
Anyway, okay, motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, all those in favor, carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight, and thank you for 6 years. This has served us well, and looking forward to moving forward. Thank you.